That is one giant walking stick. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Rebuild It. This week we continue working on the high country. Alright, so I did get all this stuff installed here. See our new coolers there. And I told you about this kinked right here. And you cannot order just that one line. It has to be this whole little thing. It's got two lines plus this valve right here. So I did get that in. And here it is. So that should be pretty easy to install. Just two connections up there. And then those two ends just go right into that new cooler we just put in. So we need to do that first, because once we get that installed, we could start it if we needed to. And then another thing I want to do before I do have all the big coolers in, the radiator and the intercooler and all that. Before I put that in, I want to check this reservoir. You guys remember on the last truck that had a bad sensor, and that even after everything was full, it would still show it was empty. So I'm gonna try to clamp off this line that goes out of it and fill that thing up with just distilled water and make sure that the light on the dash shows that it's full before I put those in and fill it all up, and then figure out I have to drain it all back out to change that reservoir. So let's do that first, and we can check that out. And the reason it's so cramped in here, I've got the door shut, I've got like a foot to work up here, it's because it is ridiculously hot outside. I mean, we're under a heat advisory, and I don't know what the heat index is, but you walk out and you are instantly dripping wet. So I'd rather deal with the tight space than the sweat. All right, so I've got this full, about that full on the level there, and I've got it clamped off pretty good, but it's leaking out a little bit. So I want to hurry up and connect my batteries and put the key in the ignition and see if our light goes off on our dash. Coolant level low. All right, so I went ahead and got one of these ordered, and so I'm just going to go ahead and get this battery out and unhook that and pour that water back in the jug, just so I don't have any leaks. And then we can go ahead and start getting the all this piping and this valve stuff switched over, and then start putting our coolers in. All right, so I've got a lot of stuff done here. I think I'm ready to put the intercooler and the radiator in, at least get it in the position. It's going to be kind of hard to get this thing clipped in there with it in, but I didn't do that last time. I think it'd be easier than the way I did it last time. But I got all the pipes ran to this cooler down here. They're all connected. Got the washer, reservoir, and battery tray in. Here's our two coolers. So I'm gonna get some help and get those things lifted in there, because they are heavy. All right, so all of the coolers are in except for the AC condenser, which is easy it just fits in these little holes up here. It's the last thing we do here. So I finally got all this stuff in here routed in the correct ways. And I mean, that's the hardest part, is getting all these pipes and everything to fit where they're supposed to fit. But I got all the big intercooler and the radiator hoses connected and all of that, so that's good. So next step is to fill it up with antifreeze. really need to wait till I get this reservoir here before I do that. So maybe I'll work on the condenser first, getting it installed and then putting this top back on. But that was the hardest part that I had left, was getting all that connected, so that's done. I think instead of working on that condenser, I'm going to go ahead and jump over here and be working on this fuse box. Remember, that's broken from the wreck, and I have the new one right here. So it's just a matter of taking everything out of that one and transferring into that one. So I can do that, and then we'll see what else we can get done. Alright, so I've got that box replaced. I just want to not put anything else in front of these coolers until I get the radiator full of fluid, so I can have better vision back in there to check, make sure I don't have any leaks. So I think I'm going to jump over here and start working on running boards. I've got running boards for this thing because, man, it is so tall. And I know you guys are going to say, hey, that's an old man thing. When it's this tall, every time you get in, you're pulling on the steering wheel and you're rubbing the seat here, and it wears the seats out. So yes, I can still lift my leg that high, but I don't want to tear up the truck over time. So I'm gonna go ahead and put running boards on it. So break those open and see how that's installed. All right, so we've got that one installed. That was pretty easy. I need to get back up under there and tighten it up all the way, but looks like it's where it needs to be. So I'll jump over and do the other side. It's a little bit more difficult because that def tank is kind of in the way of one of the brackets, and you have to do a little bit of cutting in there. So I'll do that and show it to you when it's done. All right, so there's the other side, and it probably took 5 times longer to do this side than it did the other side, just because of that tank up underneath there. You have to kind of cut around where those brackets go, and it's really hard to reach up under there and get the bolts bolted in to the body. Anyway, it's on now, and also I got the new antifreeze tank in, so we can get that installed and start filling this bad boy up with fluid. So we are getting ready to fill this whole system with antifreeze, and I've got a new fun little tool here. It's called an airlift, and what it does is it uses our shop air in this tank to create a vacuum and suck out all air in the whole system. So we'll turn it on, we'll leave this valve on, and we'll watch the gauge up here, and we'll run it until it gets to that green area, which we want it to be about like 25 pounds or so. And then we'll shut the valve off, and it should hold that vacuum for 20 or 30 seconds. We just want to make sure that we don't have any leaks anywhere in the system, that the hoses are all holding and everything. And then we can remove this and put our other hose on here. Put this down in our antifreeze tanks or jugs. Anyway, once we get this one hooked up into the antifreeze, it'll suck out all the fluid and get it into the system. And then whenever this gauge gets all the way back down to 0, that means the system is full. You got to make sure that when we put this down in our jug of antifreeze, we don't ever let it run dry. So like whenever we get it starts getting low to the bottom of a gallon, we put more in there. Don't ever let it suck air, because then we got to start all over again. So let's see how this works. You'll notice when you do this is it collapses the radiator hose because it's sucking that vacuum out. So I mean, that is flat as good as a pancake. And it's been close to 30 seconds, and I don't see any movement in the gauge. So we are good. So now we're going to disconnect this stuff and connect our suction hose. All right, so I've got the end of our suction tube down in the bottom with this clear thing where I can see it. So I'm going to open these valves. And this should start sucking it out, and I'm going to, before it gets down too low, I'm going to shut this valve back off and then switch containers. And it is sucking it out fast. Okay. Down kind of low. Put the antifreeze up here. Get it way down in there. And then turn it back on. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to keep doing this until I get all of them back in there, until our pounds and vacuum is down to 0. Okay, so our system is full and we vacuum tested everything and there's no leaks. So that is awesome. That is a great invention. I love it. So now we do all it is there's a rubber piece inside this neck here that you twist this ring and it expands the rubber, it like pulls it together, expands it so there's no leaks. So now we just need to put our cap back on, which turns on these in reverse left-handed threads, which is weird. And so when we start this thing up, we should be good. Our light should go off, and we'll watch that. If it goes down any, we'll put some more antifreeze in it. But we can't really start it till we get all of our batteries and all that stuff hooked back up. So, all right, before I start it and open the door and get it hot in here, I think I'm gonna go ahead and get this cap put back on, this one over the top of the radiator support, and it holds the condenser in. So I'm just gonna go ahead and set the condenser in there, get it all bolted in, except for I'm not going to hook the lines to it yet until we start it and let it run and make sure everything's good with the cooling system, because I just want to make sure that it gets up to temperature and nothing overheats and all that, so we don't have to take all that back off, because you don't want to repressurize AC lines and all that stuff. So let's get all that on there and then we'll start it up. Alright, so I've got the battery in there, I've got the intake reconnected, I've got all that stuff connected over the condenser, and I went ahead and just bolted this on just to keep it clean, so I didn't charge the system or anything. I think I'll go ahead and put this big brace across here that holds the hood latch and the headlights and all that stuff, the grill. At least I can get that installed, and it comes in this gigantic box. It's in my way. So I'll go ahead and get that out of there, and then I can get that box out of here. Okay, so we've got that giant chunk on there, and we got all the wires routed back around the way they were from the factory, and I'm hoping this latch is okay. I can't really tell if it's bent much. I don't know if it's spread out, like it's spread out too much on the top. It could be. If it is, I'll order another one of those, but we'll see once we get the hood on there. So hopefully when we start this up, we have no antifreeze warning light and no washer fluid warning light. And this has probably been a long time since this thing ran for a long time. No warning lights. So that is awesome. So I'm just going to let it run for a while and try to get that temperature gauge up to the middle. And I don't know if the fan would ever kick on because it's not a very hot day, but I just want to make sure I don't see anything leaking, or just make sure there's no alarms before we start working on the AC. All right, so this thing has probably been running 10 or 15 minutes. And there's where our temperature is right there. So definitely not overheating. I don't have any leaks that I can find. Okay, so we're starting on the AC part of this build, and I've got my manifold gauges hooked up to the high and low side up here and to my vacuum pump. So I'm going to turn this on, and I'm going to open up my gauges. And I'm going to let this vacuum work for 30 minutes. So I'll see you in 30 minutes. Alright, so it's been 30 minutes and I've been pulling the vacuum for that amount of time. So now I want to close these valves. And I can shut off my pump. And then I'm going to let this sit another 30 minutes and make sure that those gauges do not move. If it moves, we've got a leak. Alright, so this is set for 30 minutes and I have no movement at all on the gauges. So that means we have a good system, no leaks. So what we're going to do now is I've got the refrigerant connected to our hose. I'm going to run this down to pierce the can and then back out to let the fluid come out. Once I start the vehicle, then I'm going to open this low side valve and we should be able to see it come up through this sight glass, the refrigerant. Once the compressor kicks on, it'll start drawing all that in. So we'll put this full can in plus 260 grams of another can, and we'll have to weigh that on our little scale there. So let's start it. Alright, so I've got my 600 grams in there. Here's my thermometer. I don't know if you can see that. 48 degrees coming out of the center vents. And I think it's still dropping, so that's good. Right, so now that we got nice cold AC, the next step is we can put our fender back on because everything up here is done. So that's always the hardest part, is the two fenders, trying to get them on there because they're not easy. Well guys, hope you enjoyed this episode of Rebuild It. If you did, please give us a thumbs up down below. This project will be done before you know it. It seems like it's just going back together really fast, and I'd say we only have another 2 or 3 episodes and that one will be in the books. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next week.
And always remember, don't retire it if you can rebuild it. Thanks so much guys for tuning in and watching this week's episode of Rebuild It. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any awesome content. Have a good one.